Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host as always, Marcus Sadu, and today we are chatting about stress. We've all got it. It's likely not going anywhere. So I want to provide you guys with some tools and takeaways that I've found to be really helpful for my clients. So let's dig right in here. Stress is like sun exposure. So too little, and we run into issues like low vitamin D levels, for example. And then too much, we risk burning, which is highly damaging to the skin. So we don't want to avoid the sun completely, but we don't want to roast in it 24/7 either. So there's a therapeutic dose of sun exposure that's really good for us. It improves circulation, bumps up our vitamin D levels, improves our general sense of well-being, and the list goes on. And like sun exposure, some stress is useful because without any, why even get out of bed in the morning? But we also don't want a ton of stress because then we're super susceptible to overwhelm. So what we're after is a balance between the two extremes. So essentially the Goldilocks principle. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Because most folks feel like they have too much stress in their lives, one of the most common mistakes I see is that they think that they need to completely eliminate all sources of stress. And that's just not the case for two reasons. So one being that it's just not possible because there are factors that are just out of our control, like health of a family member or the stock market or a flight being canceled or delayed. And then secondly, stress is a useful tool that we can use to our advantage. So for example, deadlines at work. If we didn't have any sort of time crunch at all with work stuff, we likely wouldn't get anything done. So our society would sort of just crumble. So with that context in mind, most of us these days are experiencing too much stress, or we're not using the stress management tools at our disposal effectively, or both. So these tips are going to be geared more so towards reducing and managing the current stressors in our lives. Number one is prioritizing sleep. So when we're not getting enough sleep, we experience higher highs and lower lows emotionally. So essentially, we're less emotionally stable, and oddly enough, folks that experience bipolar disorder often have really fragmented and poor sleep. And the really high highs and low lows is exactly what they experience. Now, I'm not saying that bipolar disorder is 100% caused by poor sleep, but it definitely doesn't help the disorder. Now, you might be thinking, I don't have time to prioritize sleep because I got too much going on. And I would actually argue the opposite. So if you've got lots going on, you need to make sure that you get plenty of sleep in order to be productive enough to complete everything. An extra half hour to an hour of sleep per night is like compounding interest. So you're going to be so much more productive in your waking hours that it will actually save you time on the back end. Sleep also just makes us a lot more resilient to whatever life throws at us. So no one is more capable of handling a curveball when they're underslept versus adequately slept. So stress less tip number one is to get your 7 to 9 hours based on your individual needs. Also, if you're someone who needs 8 hours, for example, give yourself 8.5 hours in bed just so you have a little bit of wiggle room there because nobody falls asleep the second their head hits the pillow. Now, I'm sure some of you ladies out there are probably like, my husband does, he's snoring within seconds, and in that case, wear earplugs. Number two is get outside. Spending even 10 to 20 minutes outdoors per day is going to reduce your stress levels because our physiology expects it. Offices, climate-controlled homes, and cars are all relatively new inventions, so do your best to get outside either first thing in the morning, on your lunch break, or at the very least after work. If you can spend some of this time in the forest, in the mountains, near an ocean or a lake, even better, because the research shows that when they compare folks who went for a walk in a city versus people that went for a walk in nature or by the ocean, the latter had larger reductions in their stress levels. So pretty cool stuff. Nature's dope. Number three is to connect. We are social animals and we need connection. So be sure to connect with friends or family and just talk about what's going on in your life. What's working, what's not working, what are you having a hard time with, what's going really well, what's not going really well. It's so helpful to get these insights and different viewpoints on things from people because we're all quote unquote in our own lives. So getting more of an objective view from someone else who's coming from a different angle is just so helpful. I personally chat with my friends and family about what's going on, and I find that super useful. And I also see a therapist bi-weekly, and I have been for over 5 years now. I've been working with him since I was about 18, but for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing hour-long sessions twice per month, and it's just so helpful. I understand that some folks aren't quite comfortable with seeing someone in that fashion. I think there's some stigma around it, but we actually don't have any issues hiring a personal trainer or nutrition coaches to help us with our physical goals. So you might want to have someone help you with your emotional well-being too, if you're open to it. If you either don't want to talk to a professional or a friend or a family member, then you can always just journal. Get whatever is going on inside of you out on the page. And I find for myself personally, once I write out or verbalize something that I'm struggling with, it really diminishes its power. So for example, if I'm feeling fearful around starting a new project, like this podcast, for example, when I first got it going, I spoke with friends about insecurities I was feeling, like, why would someone want to listen to my podcast when there were so many other great podcasters out there? What if people don't like the information? Am I going to have anything to talk about? And the list goes on and on. But simply voicing or writing down my concerns had them feel not nearly as big or overwhelming. Number 4 is nutrition. Of course, I had to mention food intake because I'm the nutrition guy and I've witnessed firsthand hundreds of my clients' lives literally change simply by shifting their eating habits. You're going to feel, look, and perform better all around. And for a lot of folks, not being stoked on how they look and feel can actually be a fairly big stressor in their lives. So for example, if someone has a social gathering to go to, but they don't like how any of their clothes are fitting, or they just don't have the energy to get out and socialize, that's going to impact tip number 3 around connecting in a big way, because they might need to socialize, have a few laughs, maybe a few drinks with friends. But if the way that they look and feel is stopping them from doing that, then it's sort of a double whammy. There are a lot of different ways to go about this, but start by prioritizing single and minimal ingredient whole food. So lean meats, low-fat dairy products, vegetables, whole fruit, starchy carbs like rice, potatoes, yams, oats, and then healthful fats as well, like olive oil, nuts, avocado, eggs, and fatty fish like salmon, for example. If that feels a little overwhelming or just like it's too much, focus on 1 meal per day. So start by having a healthful breakfast tomorrow, or add a cup of vegetables to each meal that you're eating. For some folks, starting small is the way to go, and others like to shift things rather quickly and just cut right to the chase. So just know thyself and implement accordingly. Personally, I like the big shift route, but that's just me. Number 5 is practice gratitude. It's really easy to just go about our day and not slow down even for literally a minute or two and just notice how great we've got it. The fact that I'm recording this podcast and you're listening to it on some sort of electronic device with so much amazing information at our fingertips, it's incredible when you take a second to think about it. There are so many things that we don't even need to think about. Like, our hearts just beat for us without even thinking about it. On the daily, we drive in these seats that happen to be on wheels that people took the time to create so our lives can be more convenient and so we can get from point A to point B in minutes instead of hours or days. It's pretty wild when you think about it. We just walk into this place called a grocery store and there's foods, it's just there. All we have to do is pay for it, as opposed to heading out on the daily hunt or forage that's highly dangerous and just takes so much energy and time. There really are countless things to be grateful for, and I say practice gratitude and not be grateful for a reason, because it takes practice to take a minute to notice and acknowledge just how amazing we have it right now. There's never been a better time to be alive, and I think that gets lost because it's human nature to be like, what's next? What do I need to do? Where do I need to go? Etc., etc. And that's an incredibly useful evolutionary trait that we have because it forwarded our species, but it's also a great way to never feel satisfied or take a second to smell the roses in a sense. The way that I personally implement gratitude is before bed. So I get ready for bed, brush my teeth, turn out the lights, and then I just run through 3 things in my head that I'm grateful for. So for example, last night, number 1 was my bed. You know that feeling where you get into bed and you're just so comfortable, you're like smiling to yourself, you're just like, I can't get any more comfy, this is amazing. Number 2 was feeling grateful for one of my nieces, Mila. She has taught me about being playful, and I've found over the last 2.5 years since she was born, it's really helped me take things less seriously and kind of just recalibrate what's important. So I was feeling really grateful for her. Number 3 is coffee. So there are some nights when I go to bed and I'm just so excited to wake up and drink my nice warm cup of coffee. It's my favorite little morning routine, and I check my emails and I start working on whatever I need to work on. I love it. After I wrap up with the 3 things I'm grateful for, I move on to practicing gratitude for 3 things that haven't actually happened yet, but I act as if they have. So for example, the first one was that I had a podcast interview today. So last night I was feeling super thankful for how well the podcast interview went. And I visualized you guys really liking the information and it being super useful. And the second one was being thankful for how well I slept last night. So having gratitude for waking up, feeling really rested and alert and ready to go about my day feeling awesome. So the second part is being grateful for what's to come. And I think that there's something to being thankful for something in advance that hasn't necessarily happened yet. And I just feel like things actually tend to play out in a more favorable way when I practice this personally. So you guys get the idea on the gratitude front. I've had a ton of success with it personally and with my clients, and it really seems to make days go a lot smoother. And I just find I'm more relaxed and at ease in general. So it's super powerful stuff. Lastly, I was going to include meditation as a bonus tip, but I think I'm actually going to do an entire episode on meditation and include my personal experience with a Vipassana retreat I went to when I was 19. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Vipassana, it's a meditation technique, and this retreat was a silent one. So I didn't talk for 10 days, which was pretty wild. You can't make eye contact with anyone either. It was super difficult, but an amazing experience overall. So I'll share that with you guys in a future episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you're interested in personalized one-on-one nutritional coaching or workout design, you can check out the website n1fitness.com, which is linked below. You can also follow me on Instagram at N1Fitness, and feel free to friend me up at Marcus Sadu on Facebook as well. Thanks again, guys, and I'll catch you on the next episode. See ya.